Hi again. So here we are with the third lecture of our case study series. In the earlier two lectures, we talked about how to solve the case studies in the UPSC exam. We were discussing the paper itself, the GS4 paper. And I have already discussed the first three case studies that have appeared in that paper. So in this video, I'll be covering the fourth case study from the same paper itself of the year 2018. We will be using the same framework that we have been using in the earlier case studies. And as you will see when we progress, it is very easy to use that framework. And I can assure you, if you're using that in the final case studies, when you are appearing for the exam, your marks will obviously be very different from what you would have expected. So let's get started on this one. I would urge you to pause the slides here, the screen here, and then read through the case unless you already have it with you. I will be skipping this part in the interest of time. So in this case, it is fairly, recent, like it is directly coming from the current affairs for this year. So if you might recollect, if you've been following the papers, which I'm sure you have been, around May, June, there was a protest in a district of Tamil Nadu in Tuticorin against the Vedanta group of companies to shut down their copper smelting plant. So the case is about that particular plant, what all happened and how it was shut down, how is it affecting the community, how it was affecting the community as well when it was open. So if you have been reading the current affairs, it's good to have some information at hand already about it. Just like, if you want to throw out things like the Water Act of 1974, the Air Act of 1981, from which the provisions have been utilized to come to a final judgment of closure of this plant in that district after a lot of rioting and police firing on activists. It will be obviously fetching better marks. However, in case you haven't had time to really go through the current affairs at that time and a question like this appears in the paper, so I assure you there is enough and more material through the framework that you can think of wherein you can definitely fetch good marks. So in the answer that I'm writing about, I'm not specifically mentioning about the acts or, bringing out some of the uh, related facts about a case like this, because you cannot be talking about the case. You can, refer to certain acts that can be invoked in a situation like this and should be abided by, but don't start talking about the case right here. But I will be taking a generalist approach. It'll be good if you can try and bring some flavor of knowing about the current affairs to it. So let's see how we progress. This is the framework that we have been using so far, the 5-pillar framework for all our cases. We will follow the same framework here. Okay, so first is the first pillar, obviously, you have to write about the key facts in the case. So in 2 or 3 lines, just summarize whatever your understanding of the case is about. It's industrial chemicals produced on a large scale by a manufacturer close to the city for past 10 years. Be short, be succinct, but ensure that you have covered most of the points because of the lack of time and also the space. You've got like 250 words, you can't be very verbose there as well. So try and cover as many facts as you can of the case, but in a very short fashion. As you can see in the first line when I'm writing, I'm talking about the industrial chemicals. They're being produced on a large scale by a manufacturer. It is close to the city. It's been happening for 10 years. So there are 4 distinct points here into one. So try and formulate your sentences like that. Rising pollution of land, water, crops affecting human and animal life, and this led to protests followed by police action. This broadly covers what all has happened to the community there, to the animals there, and what was the consequence of it. There were protests and police action. Eventually, the state closed the unit, leading to unemployment, loss of business to ancillary units, and also to the buyers of the product. So the case does not end at what all happened after the protest, that there is a closure, because that's not the real happy ending that has happened. The ending is still going on, wherein a lot of people are getting affected by the closure. Now we identified the second pillar of the key stakeholders. First is obviously the state government and the police, which are like the government administrative machinery. People of that area who are living, the community in that district, ancillary units, as well as the buyer. So here I'm covering the supplying side as well as the buying side. The company owner, the management there, the workers that are getting affected because they are losing their jobs. The officer in charge, the person obviously here is you, who is entrusted with the task of taking care of this situation. So you are an equally involved party here. The third part, the third pillar, is the ethical dilemma. So as I mentioned earlier as well, it is important to highlight what the ethical dilemma in this case is, because it shows a deeper understanding of what the question is being talked about. Unless you understand the problem, you may not arrive at the right solution. So one is letting the plant remain closed will lead to unemployment of multiple related companies and also affect dependence on those companies. So, I mean, the dilemma here is that even if you close the plant for the betterment of the community, you are taking away employment and livelihood generation for many families, not just directly but indirectly as well, that are connected to that company. If you follow things in the other fashion and you reopen the plant, it will again increase pollution levels, and it will again affect human health, animal health, soil, etc. So this is again a dilemma that you can't directly just reopen it. Should the workers, ancillary units, buyers face the brunt of negligence of HSE norms by the company? HSE is health, safety, and environment. So here the other third dilemma is that whatever is happening is directly affecting the lives of the people there, either be it the community or be it the people who are employed and the families connected to them. But should they really be bearing, I mean, for any of the decisions, should they only bear the burden? Because the state actually came up with this idea of opening the plant when they knew there has been opposition in the other states to not open it. So there would be something wrong. So the due diligence was not really done at that time. And not while the operations as well, when the pollution was taking place. There should have been some audits. Is a knee jerk reaction by the state justified with years of negligence towards a disaster in the making? So for 10 years, you just keep a blind eye and do not look at what is happening till it reaches to a point that there is rioting, then there is police firing, and then eventually there's a knee-jerk reaction to shut down everything. What about the people who are completely dependent on that plant? Either it should not have come, or if it had come, there should have been some norms in place which were audited on a regular scale. If it's not only the fault of the people or the company here, it's a composite fault, and you need to highlight that. So we'll start with our analysis, which is the fourth pillar of this framework. We'll come up with 2 to 3 options. As I mentioned, at least have 2 and 3. The first is being an officer, you recommend closure of the plant indefinitely in your report. That will stop pollution and also address the issue of approval by states close to the city. So ideally, it should not have come very near to the city because it is a polluting industry. So you recommend that it cannot be opened again at that place. The pros in this case will be that the lives will not be affected, they will start improving, but the pollution levels will go down. The state will again be gaining goodwill, and that was destroyed by the public outcry because of the protest and killing. It will act as a lesson for future administration to follow strict HSE norms before installing any polluting plant in an area which is close to the city, especially because such closures will give a deterrent to any company to come up either in that area, and or if they do come at all without having proper norms in place, then they would know that there is a flag to be faced later, which is more disastrous. The cons in this case, there are obviously multiple cons here as well. The workers of the plant, the ancillary units and buyers will eventually be paying the price through the loss of their livelihood and employment. Their families will get affected. They are also parties involved in this case, and no one is actually thinking about them with the present knee-jerk reaction of just closing it down. What wrong have they really done in that case? Business in the district will reduce and it will lead to closure of multiple units. Indirectly, it will also affect the lives of the normal communities there, which were thriving probably on the existing business opportunities there. It's a knee-jerk reaction by the state, as I mentioned earlier, for holding the owner only responsible and shutting the plant, while ignoring insufficient audits by state to address problems earlier. So again, it's like you just dumping your responsibility on someone else and punishing them for it. It is not a just state that it will be termed eventually. Second option, reopen the plant at a different location away from the city to avoid affecting lives and ensure all HSE norms are followed. So in this case, as the question is demanding that you need to be slightly innovative, try and think out of the box. I'm sure there are other solutions as well that you can ponder on. You can have more pros and cons to it, but restrict yourself to the time and space limit in the paper itself. So I'm not delving too deep into multiple options here. But whichever option you take, do give its pros and cons or advantages or disadvantages, whichever you want to name them. The pro in this case is the health of the people will not be affected again. The state will again give a strong message of being sensitive to local issues and may gain political leverage. It may compel other plants to follow proper pollution norms that they might in case be avoiding in the entire state because a district has already faced some of these issues. The cons in this particular option is significant losses for the company and ancillary units if they relocate, and they will be losing time as well. And time is of essence in any business because someone else might come as a competitor and take your place in that case. So it may really not be a very feasible solution to do that. People unemployed may not relocate, leading to again their loss of livelihood, so they may really not benefit. So the buyers might also find other options by the time the plant comes up again, eventually leading to further losses. In this case, it's like a lose-lose situation. No one might actually be able to gain any leverage out of this solution. So it's a no-go area. Relocating it may not be the most feasible solution because it takes a lot of time to come up. Third option. State should reopen the plant with penalty on manufacturer for having flouted the norms for so many years. They should be self-compliant, being a good citizen, and ensure adequate measures to control pollution are in place. So this comes across as somewhat of a win-win solution because the people who are affected directly because of employment might actually get their jobs back as well. Pros in this case, as I mentioned, that the people in the ancillary units as well will get their jobs back and there won't be a lot of distress in the community. Penalty to be used by the state to clean the polluted water and land for better livelihood of the people. The people might also feel that, okay, something better is being done for whatever the deterioration of their land, water has happened. And they may actually not go against the decision in that case. State may improve its credibility with businesses and more companies may open while increasing the employment because in this way the state is acting not on a knee-jerk reaction but it's trying to balance the community as well as the business interest because at the end of the day employment is also for the community. That happens when a business comes to the state. So they are trying to be friendly towards the companies as well as to the people, being sensitive to both issues. So as you can see, it is sort of like a midway solution. The cons in this case are that public outcry may again ensue because and with that the state government might face political losses because people might think that they're really favoring the private sector as they're opening the plant again. They may not really get to know that there are adequate checks in place. There is something already happening for the community through the penalty that is coming out from the manufacturer. The mistakes of past may repeat unless state increases vigilance on pollution level. Having a guideline is not enough. It needs to be implemented and followed, and the state needs to ensure that it happens. So they will have an added responsibility, which if they don't fulfill, people might again revolt. Immediate relief from pollution may not be possible as new plant takes time and pollution levels may really increase. So there are again cons and cons in this case, as you can see. So yeah, the final solution that the special officer may take for the way forward. As you can see, the earlier three options that we analyzed, third solution is where we come to a midway kind of an approach, and that is the solution that we'll be taking forward. We will just build upon it because the question actually demands that you need to come up with an innovative approach of solving a deadlock like this. So when you take an option, you slightly deliberate it further. And the reason for putting the framework in this question as well has been because in a 20-25 marks question, if you put only that this is going to be the final solution and these will be the measures through which it will be implemented, you clearly see it's not really a case study that we are trying to analyze here. So invariably, in this sort of a question also, you will put forth the options that you might actually think of because it shows that you are deliberating on them. You will be taking a measured and a weighed decision in a situation like this, which is required of any civil servant. So now we will come down to the final part of the solution, which is the fifth pillar here, that you deliberate on the final option. So in this case, since you are highlighting your approach, it's usually better to have it in a short-term and a long-term sort of a fashion. So in a short-term solution, you would recommend reopening the plant after strict adherence to pollution control action plan. Ensure that pollution control agencies provide a go-ahead to boost public confidence about corrective measures. Because in this case, the Water Act or let's say the Air Act, if at all it has been implemented, you need to get the pollution control and the environment agencies on board so that people feel that yes, adequate measures have been taken into place. The most important thing will be once decided, how will you really implement a solution like that, which will show your approach as a civil servant to a problem like this. Ensure adequate penalties imposed on manufacturer to correct the pollution situation aggravated in the past entire decade. And they really need to come on board to be able to pay that penalty. Get social activists on board as well because they have paraded against the closure, in favor of the closure of the plant. So once they come on board, people will feel some confidence again. So get them on board with the revised plan to influence people about the improved situation and avoid further outcry. So this is what you can do, in a short term to at least kickstart the machinery of reopening the whole setup. Because at the end of the day, we can also mention that the people who will be directly affected, who will completely lose their livelihood, are the ones who are employed in it, as well as those who are working in the ancillary units or even the buyer side. Long-term solution here. Put in place adequate checks and balances for pollution levels that should be followed across industries that are either opening in the state or are already present. So once you show that there is higher vigilance and there are checks and balances happening, it will bolster the image of the state administration for the people that they are being sensitive. Recommend an agency or a capacity building of an existing agency to run regular audits of the companies, similar companies. Create policy of safe distance from habitation for deploying such polluting industries. Obviously, there is a policy existing across the country for such industries, but reinforcing it in the state as well. The state henceforth will be following these norms, will again put the cogency of the decision that the state has taken to the public, and they will be having better confidence in their administration. So here the state will also not lose out exactly. Sort of this is a win-win situation. People may not lose their livelihoods here. The company may not lose even the indirect employment that is happening because of a lot of business coming into that district, which will otherwise may not have any business. They will not be affected much and the pollution levels will be under control. So this is the kind of approach that I would suggest you take eventually. With this, we come to the end of case study 4. And in the next subsequent videos that will be uploaded, we'll be discussing case study 5 and 6. The approach may differ in those two case studies slightly because they are asking a lot of ethical, I mean, the knowledge of ethics, and you might have to use a lot more concepts there. These cases were still some which you can solve even without having no knowledge of the books that you have of ethics. So the framework is really compatible for all of them. So, with this, I will bid adieu to you all. Thanks for watching this lecture. Do like, share, and subscribe to Imprint IS if you actually admire what we are doing. Thank you so much for your time.